Hello and welcome to the Meet the Parents podcast.
Welcome to episode 17 of the Meet the Parents podcast, and another half an hour of discussion from some of the UK's top parenting bloggers. I'm Tim from Slouching Towards Thatcham, and today I'm joined by John from Dadblog UK and Hayley from Downside Up. Good evening, both of you.
Evening, Tim.
Hello, Hayley. Hello, Tim.
So this week we're going to talk about some examples of reversing stereotypes, and then have a bit of a chuckle at some of the funnier things our children say and do. Although when I say reversing stereotypes, that's nothing to do with car parking. Now, Amy and I talked last week about the life of a working parent and how some of the traditional workplace stereotypes and practices are slowly changing. So continuing in a similar vein, tonight we're going to touch on some broader examples where old-fashioned labels and stereotypes are also beginning to alter. So, John, let's start with a recent post that you wrote about Mothercare. Now, here's a company whose very name is far from inclusive of fathers and whose old mission statement even talked about being designed to meet the needs of mothers-to-be, babies and children up to the age of 8. So, first of all, tell us about how you came to meet with Mothercare's global brand and marketing director, Gary Kibble.
It was a bit of a strange story, actually. I haven't shopped at Mothercare in, we've been coming on 45 years now. The reasons are twofold. First of all, I do vote with my wallet, and I could sort of overlook the Mothercare name. I sort of accept the fact that that's too sort of stuck in people's conscience, and that'll probably never change. But when I became a stay-at-home dad, I discovered that awful mission statement, and I kind of thought, the company sells things like baby baths and pushchairs and car seats and stuff that any father would use. The company emailed me, inviting me to the unveiling of their autumn-winter clothes range, and I emailed them back and explained that, I was very polite, but I just explained I didn't agree with their corporate mission statement. And I also said that I'd had some, which is true, I'd had some issues with the quality of its merchandise in the past. And I sort of didn't really feel, I thought it would go against what I sort of stood for by going along. Suddenly I got an email from them saying, hey, we understand we probably haven't covered ourselves in glory in the past. Would you like to come along to see our clothes range and also meet with Gary Kibble? Which seemed like a great opportunity to hear exactly what the brand is up to, what improvements it is making.
So I guess it's fair to say that your initial view of Mothercare before your meeting was less than positive, yeah?
Yes, less than positive. I can say hand on heart that every big purchase that my wife and I made from Mothercare would either arrive broken or had some fault with it. And we then had one or two very unfortunate experiences with its customer service team. And I know from speaking to other people that we are not alone, and in fact Gary Kibble admitted that there had been product issues, there could be quality issues in the past. So there's no state secrets there at all, I don't think.
Yeah, that's never good when that happens and when you're not alone, isn't it? So, I mean, Hayley, have you had any thoughts or experiences with Mothercare in the past, either positive or negative?
I hadn't got any particularly bad experiences that stand out, having purchased anything large that was broken. But I think perhaps some of the clothing wasn't of the greatest washability and so on and so forth, but probably wasn't somewhere that was a go-to place for me to shop, perhaps.
So, John, I noticed in your post you were saying that Mothercare are now saying they're a brand in transition. So they're talking about being or wanting to be the leading retailer for parents and young children, which is quite a significant change in stance, isn't it? It's much more inclusive. So from your meeting, did you think there was a genuine change in approach now? And, as a result of it, has it changed your opinion of Mothercare at all?
There is a change in approach. They have changed their awful corporate mission statement. The other thing they have done is they've sort of adopted a brand agenda called Welcome to the Club to be more inclusive. Mm-hmm. And Gary Kibble did explain to me that the idea there is that they're hoping that this will filter down through the organisation to the shop floor, and that all staff will be much more inclusive in their approach, because the club, as Gary Kibble explained it to me, could be a single parent with child. It could be an IVF family. They've gone down that route. And quite significantly, what he said to me was it could involve or could be a same-sex couple. And it's funny, all the sort of writing and stuff I do about stay-at-home dads, I do notice that sort of stay-at-home dads and same-sex families are sometimes fighting very similar battles. So for me, it was fascinating to actually hear a retailer of that size acknowledge same-sex couples, because an awful lot of them don't. And my personal belief is the parenting industry is caught like a rabbit in the headlights when it comes to same-sex couples. They just do not know how to handle them. That's my opinion. But my thoughts on mother care is, yeah, they're a brand in transition. I think they've still got more to do. It's sort of come to light that up in their Leeds store, they've apparently, which has been rebranded and gone through a whole refurbishment process, it has apparently got a place in there called Mum Space, and this is a place for events to be held. And I just think, that wasn't the wisest thing to do. There's obviously still more work to be done, but from my conversation with Gary, I think the heart might be in the right place, but there's still got more to do.
Yeah, and I guess any significant cultural change, such as the kind of thing that they're talking about here, is something that takes a long time to filter down. It's all very well someone at the top saying it, but for that kind of change to filter down to the shop floor, and there are inevitably mistakes that are going to be made along the way, aren't there? Yeah,
there are. Let's see where Mothercare are in 2 or 3 years. They're saying all the right things at this point in time. There obviously have been changes. There have been significant changes in that senior management team as well. I just hope that sort of what they're promising, what they're trying to achieve, does happen long term. And you're absolutely right, Tim. You have to accept the fact this is a company, was it something like 1,300 outlets across 50 odd nations. So I suppose we've got to give Mothercare a bit of breathing space and actually let that change actually happen.
Yeah, and interestingly, I guess the one thing that isn't changing is the retailer's name itself, isn't it? So Mothercare as a name dates all the way back to the company's creation in 1961. And admittedly, those were very different times when mums generally did take care of all the childcare, and men went to work and, as far as I can gather, spent their evenings in smoke-filled pubs drinking pints of warm beer. Yeah, things are certainly very different now. And, obviously, John, both you yourself and our own Dave are great examples of the alternative roles that dads can play in a modern family. So what's your thoughts on the name, given all that? Do you think it's right to retain the name at a time when other brands such as, Kiddie Care and Mamas and Papas have much more gender neutral names?
I used to be, amongst many different journalistic roles, I used to be a business journalist, and I do sort of understand that once a name like Mothercare is so entrenched, you've got an astounding job to try and change it. So I can kind of, as I say, in an ideal world, yeah, the name would change, but it's more important that the culture does, I think.
It just reminds me of the charity MenCap, which obviously comes from mentally handicapped, which is horrendously outdated and actually quite a horrible phrase to use now. But it's so stuck and so well recognised that we all kind of just gloss over that, don't we? And we know it's a great charity, but well done, John, on having those important conversations. And it does sound like they're really listening, and change has to start somewhere, I guess, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think I agree with you, John. I think, this is one of those occasions where there is a lot of justification in retaining the name, even though it is outdated. And as you say, it would be quite a significant upheaval to change it now. And, any marketer will tell you how big a risk it is to completely rebrand a company. And, even if they kept the change minimal and rebranded themselves, say, I don't know, Parent Care, well, actually, that's a pretty crap name, isn't it? I know you do get examples of consumer brands that have changed their name, but usually it's either pretty minor. So you get for example, Oil of Ulay became Oil of Olay, didn't it? And Jif became Sif, or often it's the result of two companies merging, such as EE, which came out of T-Mobile and Orange joining together. But I guess if Mothercare were to be acquired by another retailer, that might present the perfect opportunity to rebrand. But I think you're right. Until then, I think the name is what it is, and I think you hit the nail on the head exactly. It's not so much about the label, it's about the culture.
Yeah, that is the most important thing. It's now a case of getting the rest of the organisation to, pull in that direction. Certainly, Gary Kibble is very keen for that to happen. So yes, we'll just have to see what the future holds. But actually, Hayley, I have to say that example of MenCap, a very telling example, actually, isn't it, from the disability field?
Yes.
So.
It is, and there's been a lot of call from parents and disability advocates and to change it. And I think they're probably resisting for the same reasons that you've just outlined. But it is very, very telling and very old-fashioned and quite offensive term. But you can't. They would lose any standing they had if they changed it completely, I guess, wouldn't they? So we gloss over.
Moving on, it's not just brand names that reinforce stereotypes, and as we've found, stereotypes go beyond gender as well. So now, Hayley, it's not just dads and non-traditional families who have been victims of exclusion and stereotyping. I mean, if you turn the pages of most magazines and catalogues, you're bombarded with images of beautiful, flawless, size 0 people with any minor blemishes airbrushed out and photoshopped to perfection. Now, your younger daughter, Natty, has Down syndrome, and she's playing her part in busting some of those stereotypes when it comes to catalogue models. So tell us a little bit more about that and how that all came about.
Yes, Tim. Well, I think when Natty was about 6 months old, I was walking through town and carrying her in a papoose, and I remember looking in a shop window, and there was a little tiny A4-sized poster in the shop window of a family wearing these fleeces, and one of the young ladies had Down syndrome, and it sort of hit me like a truck that I'd never seen anything like that before. And actually it's not just kids with disabilities, is it? We all need to see ourselves represented in advertising, whatever, shapes, sizes, backgrounds, cultures. And but it did really struck me that was the very first time I'd seen a child with any kind of disability in a poster, in an advert. And so then it was pretty soon, well, a couple of years later, Natty could walk, I started writing round and sort of politely asking. But yes, the rest is history, I guess. But there is a move. There are lots of children doing it now, lots of kids. But we still seem to be stuck in this place where it's mostly just children with Down syndrome because they're really cute who get picked up for these roles. We've yet to see a child who's a wheelchair user in a back-to-school campaign, or actually any adult with any kind of disability. Once you hit the teens, I guess you cease to be cute. So we've got a long way to go, but something that I'm passionate about. And I get a lot of criticism for pushing Natty into the modelling world, and you're making money out of her, and it's such a superficial world. Well, we're kind of massively out of pocket with sort of the various things we've done and the places we've travelled to. And Natty just thinks it's a play date, that when we go along and she just mucks around on a stage and someone takes photos of her and she gets to show off.
And how does she respond when she sees, I guess, both herself or other children? Does she respond well to that?
I think she just takes it all in her stride. If she sees herself, she smiles, she gets very excited. Oh, it's me. But she's been doing it since she was about 3, so I guess that's her reality, her normality. If she sees another child with Down syndrome in a magazine or in a book, she says, "Oh, it's me." Or, oh, it looks like me, or that's my Erin, or one of her friends. So she just thinks that's herself.
And like you said just now, if it doesn't matter whether you're a child or an adult, we all subconsciously want to see and associate with people like us. So,
yeah.
That's really important. It's interesting, going back to what you said just now about there not having been imagery of children in wheelchairs as part of back-to-school campaigns and so on. That's really shocking.
It is shocking. And Natty was the very first child in the UK to ever be in any back-to-school campaign at all, ever, with any kind of disability, which I find shocking because all children, we buy a uniform for all children, don't we? And the fact that it's still newsworthy is shocking in itself.
It's interesting though, isn't it? I mean, even in these times, it can still be a bit of a nightmare navigating the diversity agenda as a company. And I think, John, you kind of alluded to this a little with Mothercare in terms of how they handle same-sex families. How do you include minority audiences while making sure that you don't offend them? Now, there was a bit of a kerfuffle, let's call it, a few weeks back, wasn't there, when an American clothing brand, and I'm pretty sure it was Gap, used an image of a group of young girls where there was a taller white girl who was leaning on the head of a shorter black girl. You might have seen it. If not, I'll dig it out and I'll add it to the show notes on the website. But even if you didn't see it, you can probably guess exactly how the controversy unfolded on social media. I have no doubt there was no racist intent on behalf of the company, but of course, people will be and were offended, and it went viral online, and let's just say I wouldn't want to have been the individuals in the company or their ad agency who signed off on that particular image. But you do have to be so careful how you represent, whether it's ethnic minorities, plus size models, or people with any kind of physical or other condition that sets them apart from the norm, whatever the hell that is. As a principle, I guess embracing diversity and imperfection and letting kids know that it's okay to be different or to be individual can only be a good lesson for them to absorb, rather than trying to paint one homogenous view of perfection that's unrealistic and ultimately undesirable.
Kids do need to be exposed to such imagery prior to start schools. I'm just thinking that my daughter actually goes to school, and there is a little boy in her class who has Down syndrome. As far as I'm aware, she would never have been exposed to such imagery in the past, and I do think that is wrong. It should just be a part of the mainstream, shouldn't it?
Yes, it's almost like where certain individuals are hidden away a little bit, out of sight and out of mind, isn't it? But I think we're working on that. It sounds like John's doing his bit, and I'm doing my bit. I think it's changing, but it's one of those slow changes that will take a long time. And I think, particularly with disability, companies are afraid that their sales are going to suffer if they, feature someone with a disability in their advertising.
One example comes, it didn't involve a child, it involved an adult. I got a phone call from a national newspaper that will remain nameless, wanted to write something on a particular medical condition, and I was doing sort of PR in that field at the time, and I can still remember the journalist's words to this day, where we want a glamorous woman, can't really be over the age of 40 and mustn't be in a wheelchair, because we just can't we can't publish those sorts of pictures. That created a bit of an ethical dilemma in the office as to quite how we proceeded with that one.
It sort of says it all, really, doesn't it?
First, there was Time Hop, the app that dredged up all those photos from your past you wanted to remember, and a few you'd rather have forgotten. Now there's Fashion Crime Hop, the app your kids will use to shame you with pictures of all those outfits that seemed so cool in your younger years, but weren't. Tie-dye shirts, flowery maternity dresses, pretty much anything from the 1980s. You may have blotted these crimes against fashion from your memory, but the internet never forgets. Download Fashion Crime Hop from the App Store or Google Play Store. You might as well, as your kids have downloaded it already. Finally, in this discussion about stereotypes, we are just 3 weeks away from the biggest parenting conference of the year, which has undergone a subtle rebranding for 2016. So Brit Mums Live is now BML, although I suspect many of us will still be calling it Brit Mums Live or Brit Mums for a while yet. So any thoughts on this rebranding? Is it a cosmetic change, or do you think it will have an impact over time in terms of becoming more inclusive towards dads and other members of the parenting community?
I think it's a natural progression. I think Tim, you've pointed out in yourself that if the percentage of guys that blog versus the number of women that blog actually turned up, we'd have about 60 guys there, versus about sort of 750 women. And actually, when you think about it, that guys really should be paying customers to this event, and they probably have been put off by the name in the past. And this will be my fourth year of going. Actually, an awful lot of the content that goes on at that show is not mum specific, it's blogger specific. So I think the rebrand's probably a very, very wise move, and I'm pretty sure there are commercial interests behind it.
I mean, Hayley, from the mum side of the fence, does the change of name have any particular impact on you?
I just assumed that it was an attempt to welcome dads with open arms, and also just shorter is easier to tweet, isn't it? It's just that whole thing as well. And of course, it's a one-day event this year instead of two. So I just thought maybe they were just streamlining and pruning down and making everything a bit slicker and a bit more modern. But I have always felt awkward at the sheer lack of dads at these events, and I just assumed maybe the dads weren't blogging as much, but actually I guess they are, and they were put off by the name. And I would have liked to see more dads at these events. I hope it will happen. I'm actually not going this year. It's not the first one I'm not going to for a while, and I feel a bit emotional about not going. Feels like so I won't be there to see the difference, but I'll wait to hear your feedback, both of you.
Yeah, and as John's alluded to, if you go by TOTS 100, 8% of their membership are male. So, out of 750 delegates, if you applied that percentage, you would expect to see around 60 dad bloggers at BritMums, and last year there were 11. I think that the name change for me, it's a small step, but it's a positive step. And I do have a bit of an issue with the BritMums name, just as I do with the names of Mumsnet and NetMums. But like Mothercare, there's a very big element where the name is what it is, and I'm not sure that changing the name would actually make that much difference or signify that much. It's not so much the name that's important, but it's more about what happens on the day and what happens afterwards. I've noticed that in some of the promotional photos that they're using for BML on the BritMums website, that one of the hero images centres on a group of dads. One of them are Dave. And that's a pretty good signal, I think, for starters. And it would be good to see dads acknowledged more on the day itself. Maybe we'll get some positive blog posts coming out of it too, and that will start to have an impact as well.
For any dads that are listening, obviously I've been one of the editors, one of the roundups there for a few years now. But for BritMums, I should say, and I think it is actually crucial that the dads may be smaller in number, but actually just to have that voice represented by BritMums is important, because I know that some of my posts I've written in the past, I don't know if you've found the same, Tim, because I know you're one of the editors as well. It's great to sort of also challenge mums and introduce mums to sort of the father's opinion. But going to BritMums Live, I have never actually felt anything but completely welcomed there. I've never had any issues. I've heard one or two guys go sort of complain they've had comments or looks, but I've never had anything like that. I've always found it incredibly welcoming.
Yeah, and that certainly echoes my experience from last year, where I never felt anything less than welcome. So when we talk about there being more dads at BML, do we think it's something that's desirable, or is it something that's actually important for there to be more dads, and indeed representatives of other parenting minorities present?
I believe in inclusion in blogging as well. It's I think it's really vital. I'm a huge fan of, for example, My Two Mums, and I think we all learn so much, don't we? We pop onto a blog, we feel like we're visiting a friend, and you come away having learnt a little nugget about the way their lives work. And I think you can very subtly teach people an enormous amount through blogging, as we all know. So it's we've got disability bloggers, we've got same-sex couples, we've got the dad bloggers, and I think that's absolutely vital. I think it's crucial. Otherwise, we've become a sort of homogenized. All the blogs would look the same, wouldn't they? I think, for me, blogging is about teaching and learning and sharing. I know there are so many different types of blogs, and some are quite, focused on reviews or whatever. But I personally visit blogs that teach me something.
Yeah, and I think I just say that it's that diversity that's really important. The blogging world would be an incredibly dull place if everyone was the same.
Oh, it'd be awful.
Well, we'd stop reading, wouldn't we?
Blogging conferences have got to recognise the fact that yes, disability bloggers, you've got same-sex couples blogging, you've got your stay-at-home dads, you've got your stay-at-home mums, and they've got to represent these whole groups. But I've actually, interestingly, I've certainly noticed the past sort of 6 months, over time, there's definitely been more dads started blogging, and I know. Vicky, who writes the Honest Mum blog, she made a very interesting comment to me a while back. She said she reckons that us dad bloggers we're a bit behind the mum bloggers and sort of commercially, that maybe she said to me that we reminded her of where maybe she and some of her colleagues were at 3 or 4 years ago, and that I think possibly what's happening now is we're seeing a sort of slight blossoming of the dad blogger scene, and there are a few of us out there who are making as much money or near it as some of the mum bloggers who blog professionally. And therefore Brit Mums and the other blogging conferences have got to recognise this. We've arrived.
Within the Down syndrome community, I've noticed a marked increase in dad bloggers, and some of them may blog. They might do 4 or 5 posts a year, but doing it for a completely different reason. It's quite cathartic. They're doing it for support. But 2 or 3 years ago there weren't any dad bloggers, and now I can think of about 10. So I think it's great. I think it's great that dads are writing about their feelings and sharing support with other dads as well, for whatever the motivation behind their blogging.
So that's the three of us setting the world to rights. The dad bloggers will be descending upon VML with a chorus of "We Shall Overcome." Alternatively, if anyone would like to join us in the chorus of "We Are the World," or "I'd like to buy the world a Coke," that would be great as well. Other carbonated beverages are available, of course. So finally, every parent knows that the world's best comedians tend to be the little people of the house. Children just say and do the funniest things all the time, don't they? Which is great for us as bloggers, because it gives us plenty of material to write about as well as to laugh at. So to finish off today, we're going to highlight a few examples of the hilarity that goes on in the Adams, Golonovska and Liu households, and help us to forget some of the more trying moments.
Before we came on air, I collared my wife and was like, "Oh, Jill, right, give me some examples. What funny things have the kids said?" Because my mind went blank and hers went blank as well. But our 3-year-old Izzy, she will, and I don't know where she gets his sense of humour from, because it is frankly mortifying, but she will sort of eat a meal or drink something too fast, and no matter what the company, she will then belch like anything, and she'll just sort of look at you and go, "Me burp."
But it's always about sort of bodily functions, isn't it? It's always about burps and farts and poo and wee, basically. That there is nothing else. That's always funny.
Yeah, I'm in trouble for having taught all the kids to burp.
Tim.
It's an important skill to pass on as a father, I feel.
I think the problem Natty is now 9 and showing no signs of abating with this sort of, really embarrassing, hilarious kind of things that she drops us in all the time. But, and unlike you, John, I had a list as long as my arm, so I'm going to, whittle this right down. It happens to me every day. And I started thinking about it, and I thought, actually, I think it's something to do with, and it could be related to her Down syndrome, but this overriding honesty. She can't not be honest. So, recently I was sitting on the loo and the phone rang, and I shouted out, "Oh, is it Daddy?" She said, "Yes, it's Daddy." So tell him I'm in the loo. Okay. So she says into the phone, "Yes, she's in the loo. Yes, she's doing a poo." Okay. And then she handed me the phone, and then a very serious, deep voice said, "Hello, this is the delivery man. I have a parcel for you, and just checking that you're going to be." So she basically just told this guy that I was doing a poo, which I could have died. And then, of course, the guy arrived 10 minutes later, and I had to open the door. So, this desperate honesty. But another one that sort of came to my mind, Natty likes to compliment people. So Bob took her to the office about a year ago, and she said to one of his female colleagues, "I like your breasts." And I was then, I said, "No, she said dress. She said, 'I like your dress.'" "No, Mummy, I didn't. I said, 'I like your breasts.'" And I just think, you can't argue with that, really, can you? They were a magnificent, fine. Anyway, but I think Natty just says it how it is, and she shows us a different way of seeing the world. So,
yeah, our kids are always saying the most unintentionally, or sometimes intentionally, funny things. So, a couple of examples, I guess. So, actually, just the other day, Heather was just popping out of the house to walk into town to run a couple of errands, and hearing her open the door, Cara came running out into the corridor and shouted to her, "Goodbye, Mum. I love you. be careful out there. and it was said so earnestly that it just cracked me up. And for those of you old enough to remember, it was just like Hill Street Blues. Let's be careful out there. The other big ongoing thing that continues to amuse me in our house is the boys' continuing obsession. An obsession is perhaps not even strong enough a word with the London Underground. So, one of their favourite board games is one based on the Tube map. They are avid fans of a recent Channel 5 reality documentary thing about the Underground and its staff, to the extent that they're often designing and building tube stations in Minecraft. And their favourite role-playing games revolve around things like, and I am not joking here, managing overcrowded stations in the rush hour. They'll be going out on strike over a new pay deal and overtime arrangements next. There are certainly many worse things that they could be obsessed about. And so I guess that's just a small selection of some of the weird and wonderful things our kids get up to that regularly put smiles on our faces. So next week, all the things our kids do which infuriate us. We might need an entire episode for that one. So before we go, what's been happening with each of us recently? John?
I think actually tomorrow it's all going to be about YouTube, because I have interviewed my 7-year-old daughter for her thoughts on the in-out EU referendum and Brexit, and turned it into a video that I'm going to be publishing tomorrow, and I think that will be quite good fun.
She'll probably have much more educated views than what we're seeing from our politicians at the moment.
Yes.
That's exactly why I spoke to her.
How about you, Hayley?
The latest news is that the documentary is actually signed and sealed and in the can. So we're kind of just, it's all kind of, spreading the word about that. And we've got the Nuffield Council of Bioethics involved in doing some research around how the new antenatal screening is implemented. So it's sort of quite dull sounding stuff. So submitting information to them, and but yeah, all kind of behind the scenes stuff that isn't particularly glamorous at the moment. But
this was the Sally Phillips documentary, wasn't it, that you were talking about a few weeks ago?
The Sally Phillips documentary that is that asks the question, what would a world without Down syndrome be like? And that should be out within the month, so we'll keep you posted.
Excellent. So that's one to look out for. And as for me, I was in London on Friday night meeting up with a group of people who have become essentially like my second family. The background behind this is a few years back I set up a collaborative cycling blog. There were 7 of us in all. Initially, none of us had even met face to face, as we're flung far and wide in locations as exotic as London, the south of France, Utah, Jersey, and most glamorous of all, Thatcham. And in fact, even 4.5 years later, I'd only actually met 2 of the others face to face, but our American team member Chris was in London this week for a conference, so 5 of the 7 of us managed to gather for dinner. So, including Chris's brother and other halves, there were 9 of us in all, only 1 of whom I'd previously met, and none of whom I would ever have even known if not for social media and a shared love of cycling. And it was genuinely one of the most fun and relaxed evenings of my life. And I say this as someone who is normally terribly shy around new people. And, for all that we complain and are wary about the darker side of online life, this was a shining example of, I think, of the good side of what our social media universe can bring us. And, without social media, I would never have started that blog. Without that blog, I would never have met Chris, who introduced me to the world of podcasting. So actually, the existence of this podcast owes a lot to that second family of mine.
And that's a shining example, isn't it, of how it all works? I think, I'm sure John will agree, but I count some of my closest friends now, people that I've met in the blogging world. It's an amazing support network.
And that's your lot for another episode of the Meet the Parents podcast. We'll be back next week, but in the meantime, here's where you can find the 3 of us online.
Downsideup.com.
dadbloguk.com, and you find me on Twitter and Instagram at dadbloguk, and on YouTube. Oh, I can never remember it. Just do a search for dadbloguk. You'll find me that way.
And I'm slouching towards Thatcham.com, and you'll find me online elsewhere at ThatchamDad. So you can download this podcast on iTunes and on Android devices, on our website at meettheparentspodcast.com, and via a variety of podcasting apps. And do please give us a follow on Twitter at ParentsPodcast and Facebook at facebook.com/meettheparentspodcast. So thank you for listening, and do please join us again next week. Good night.